Once we've done the barriers and opportunities, that will then relate to strategies. If the barrier is that we don't know how to do annual appeal campaigns, we've got to develop a strategy. And strategies typically are the hardest thing in planning for people to really get their arms around. And so, a question for you. The pioneers, when they moved west, one of their strategies was to travel in wagon trains. Why was that? Anybody? Strength in numbers. Why was that important? What was the barrier? Hostile indigenous people. Exactly. They were traveling through people's land, shooting their turkeys and game and stuff, and they didn't like it. And so one of the ways that they dealt with that was to travel in wagon trains. Now, my Aunt Tilly, not a real person, but for purposes of illustration here, lives in San Francisco. Aunt Tilly was responsible for me being able to go through college, helped me get through college. I get word that she's dying and I want to see her before she passes away, and I've been told she only has 4 days to live. What's my strategy for getting out, my best strategy for getting out to see Aunt Tilly? My goal is to see her before she dies. Anybody? Get on a plane. Problem is, it costs $1,800 for the trip to San Francisco. I don't have $1,800. Another strategy. Borrow money from Jim. Jim, can you loan me $1,800? Another strategy.
Find better friends.
Find better friends. That's one we haven't heard, Jim. One we haven't heard. Anybody else? Craigslist, eBay to buy a ticket? Yeah, some people will suggest compassionate tickets. There's all kinds of suggestions, and it usually gets down after I play this game long enough with you. Somebody will say, well, find somebody in San Francisco that has a computer, a laptop that can take it in and you can Skype it or do whatever. But the point is that as we do strategies and as we look for what the best solutions are, we've got to keep them within the reality of our ability to do something. And so the best strategy may not be the most doable strategy. It's got to be something that is within your own capabilities to carry out. And it may be eventually that what I would have to say in the case of Aunt Tilly is, I've just got to give up on this. There's no way I can make this happen in 4 days. Or I may have to just settle for a telephone call or whatever. So you change the goal. And that's what this is really where the rubber meets the road in planning is when we do the strategies. And then once we've set the strategies, we translate those into, again, back into measurable objectives. So a goal of raising $25,000 in new funds might have $10,000 from annual appeal campaign. It might have $5,000 from super duper 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 donut sale or whatever. And all of those things together will, all these targets or objectives, whatever you prefer to call them, will add up to the total number that we're trying to raise. And then we've got to determine the action steps. Once we've done all of that, we go back and we make sure we've covered the critical audiences. Deadlines for each action step, and someone is in charge. The three things that determine whether a goal is really a goal: it has to be measurable, it has to have a time frame associated with it, and it has to have somebody's name attached to it. If you want something to be accomplished, those are the three things. And you can't put a committee in charge of anything. Definition of a committee is a group of the unwilling charged with doing the impossible for the incompetent. Somebody's name. If it's a committee chair, fine. But somebody has to be on the hook. A group of people will defer to each other and nobody is really in charge. This little figure, incidentally, is whirling dervish, meaning put somebody there that's going to make things happen. You have to expense things. In our planning process, we don't put a charge against everything when we do the tactical plans. We only put numbers in where it relates to new expenses, because we figure you've already got most of your operation budgeted in your budget, so let's not complicate things. When you go back and once you've got your plan in pretty good shape, you go back and reread it, put your feet up on the ottoman and sit down and read it and say, okay, what have we missed? Make some changes. As I said before, the first item of business at every board meeting ought to be a review of the plan. And then as you go along, revise it. I sit on the board of Jim's family's nonprofit, and my job is to keep the plan updated. So I go to a board meeting, we have a board meeting, I sit there with a copy of the plan, I make notes on things that have changed, added to, taken away, completed, and I go back. It takes me about 20 minutes to keep the plan updated. And therefore, we don't have to go back year after year after year and start the planning process over. This is probably the most important slide I'll share with you of all the presentations. Anything you're going to do as an organization, you ought to ask these 5 questions. Will it move us toward our vision? Is it in keeping with our mission? Can we do it? Meaning, do we have the human resources to do it? Can we fund it? Meaning, can we afford to do it? And can we sustain it? Meaning, can we keep it going after we've started it? If I give your organization $50,000 to start a new program this year, and then I give you $40,000 next year, and then $30,000, and then $20,000, and then none, at the end of 5 years, you will have to have netted 682 new $100 donors to keep that program sustained, to keep it running. And what happens is organizations don't do that, so what do? You take it out of the hide of your staff. You rob money from other programs. You don't give staff raises or whatever to keep these programs going because you're carrying people. The hardest thing that most nonprofit organizations have to do is to cut programs when you can't afford them. Well, we can't do that because it's going to hurt somebody. And I always say, what will hurt more? If you're out of business? Or if you cut your programs? I just did a big thing down in North Carolina, day-long seminar on managing in difficult economic times. And somebody asked the question, how do you know when you've cut too much or when you can't cut anymore? And I said, when you got one client and one staff member left. You got to keep, the real trick in managing nonprofit organizations is to keep revenues and income balanced with expenses. The greatest sin of nonprofit management is deficit budgeting. It's the killer of nonprofits. If you want to die as a nonprofit, I'm telling you, do deficit budgeting. And if you're a board member on a nonprofit organization and you allow it, shame on you, because you're hurting somebody's life. Every one of your organizations is in business to help people. And who are you doing a favor to if you spend more money than you take in? Are you helping the clients ultimately? Are you helping the staff? Are you doing a service to your funders? Probably no in all of those cases. You are a business, and as Jim said, you're a profit-making business. You measure your profits in terms of the number of lives changed. I spent 40 years in the corporate world, and I can tell you there was not a day I went home and put my feet up at the end of the day where I could say to myself, you know, I did something today that changed somebody's lives. And you people do this every day. And your ability to do it depends on balancing what you're able to generate in revenues with what you spend in terms of carrying out your mission. And if Jesus Christ couldn't save the world in 2,000 years, why do you think you can do it in 12 months in a budget cycle? Do what you can do, and do it as good as you can do it, and build your organization on a solid footing.